The first of these 12 patterns we're going to look at is this one. It's called star 442. By the way, within these 12 patterns, there's kind of three families. There's the reflecting reds. So those are patterns that are just reflective symmetry. And then these ones are nicknamed the true blues, and those pretty much just use rotational symmetry. Then lastly are these six called the hybrids, and they use a combination of rotations and reflections. The star 442 pattern is, I think, the most common one in floor designs. So here we have from the wild the floor pattern that Floppy Donkey used in their showcase a few months ago. Yep, and sure enough, this is star 442. The reason I spent 5 minutes in the first video just going through the symmetries that individual blocks could have is because the names of these patterns, so star 442 in this case, that just refers to the symmetries that the individual blocks inside the pattern have. I've visualized one of those here, and it's the middle, so the dead center where the 4 emerald and 4 lime glass blocks meet. It has 4 lines of reflective symmetry running through it, so you could mirror it, left to right, it would look the same. You could mirror it top to bottom, it would look the same. And you could mirror it across both diagonals, and the pattern would still look the same. By the way, that's kind of what symmetry means, is the ability to move or transform an object without changing how it looks. So I took those 4 lines of symmetry, drew them all together along with lines of reflective symmetry along the edges, and then just kind of tiled this together and made a big floor of it. So here we have 4 lines of reflective symmetry all passing through the same point, but at the corners we also have 4 lines of reflective symmetry all passing through the same point. And then lastly, on the middles of the edges, we have 2 lines of reflective symmetry meeting. And so you probably noticed just staring at it that it's all the same triangle, just over and over again. Just by reflecting this triangle over and over again, you can build up the entire pattern. So if you thought of the pattern as a crystal, the fundamental region, in this case a triangle, would be kind of like an atom, the basic building block. And because this triangle has one corner with 4 lines of symmetry, another corner with 4, and one with 2, it gets the name star 442. The next reflecting red we'll look at in a later video is going to be star 2222. And here I kind of surgically removed one of those fundamental triangles just to kind of highlight the different types of corners it has. That's the math, and now the question is just how would you actually build up your own version of this pattern? So for instance, I made this just kind of a little braided strand. I'm not good with texturing, man. So this I just reflected with Lightmatica over and over, and when you're all done, you get a star 442 floor pattern. I do have to make one math tangent, which is that you might notice that there's also rotational symmetries here. Like if you took the whole thing and rotated it 90 degrees, it would look unchanged. So in math, when you're studying an object's symmetries, it's usually actually enough to just pay attention to its reflections. In the same way that molecules break down into atoms and atoms can be built up into molecules, rotations and reflections are actually kind of the same. A rotation can be broken down always, no matter what dimension or where it is, into 2 reflections. And 2 different reflections put together will always give you a rotation. So there are rotational symmetries here, but I'm not showing or paying attention to them because they're, I guess, explained by the reflections I've shown here. And so when we name and categorize these patterns, we don't pay attention to a rotation if it decomposes into the reflections of the pattern. This is what's going to make those hybrid types over there interesting, is that they have rotational symmetry, but it's a rotation that doesn't decompose into its reflective symmetries. But that's a headache for later. This time we just have to worry about reflections. So the first choice you got to make when you're building up this pattern is actually just how you position this basic triangle. So obviously Minecraft, is a square grid. Lines run north, south, east, west, up, down. What that means is this triangle is always going to have at least one side diagonal to the Minecraft grid. You could set it up so that the 2 short legs are in line with the Minecraft grid, and then the hypotenuse, the long side of the triangle, is diagonal. Or you could set it up where the long side is in line with the Minecraft grid and the 2 shorter sides are diagonal. Both of these turn out to work perfectly well for making floor patterns, and it turns out which you use is just a matter of taste. The first choice we'll look at, where the 2 shorter sides are in line with the Minecraft grid, it actually occurs naturally on the textures of a lot of the glazed terracotta blocks. So you can almost picture the triangle here where the long side runs from corner to corner diagonally, and the two shorter sides run along the bottom edge and the left edge there. Or you could think of the triangle as being like on the other half, but we're going to be reflecting it anyways, so it doesn't really matter. And then if you take that triangle and just keep reflecting it, you get this. If you use magenta, you get this. If you use the pink, you get this. And then for the second choice here, where we have the long side of the triangle in line with the grid and the two short sides diagonal, we can use two of these glazed terracotta blocks side by side. Okay, so this is going to start to take some imagination, but picture one line going from this corner to the middle of the opposite side, a third line going from the middle of the opposite side to this corner, and a third line just going across the bottom edge. That's the triangle we're now reflecting. Obviously, I can't like slice a block right down the middle. It would make visualization a lot easier. But the fundamental region here is that triangle. If you reflect 4 copies of it, you get this little 2x2 section. And if you keep reflecting it, you get this. So if you were to encounter this pattern in like someone else's build and wanted to figure out which of the 12 types it was, you would look for points on it that have 4 lines of mirror symmetry. So the first kind of point that has 4 mirror lines through it are these gray dinner plates. You could probably see that the red gear shapes are the second kind of point that has 4 mirror lines. So lastly, we would need to find a point that has 2 lines of mirror symmetry going through it. And sure enough, it's this point right here where the 2 red blotches kind of hug together. So if you were to mirror flip across this vertical line or over this horizontal line, it would look different because the red blotches would kind of like swap which corners they're attached to. However, if you look at it diagonally, it has perfect reflective symmetry across both diagonals. So the pattern is star 442, and we have 4, 4, and 2. 4 lines, 4 lines, and 2 lines of reflective symmetry. One interesting side note is that because both of these triangles have diagonal edges, any block on that edge is going to have diagonal reflective symmetry. And there aren't a lot of blocks that do. It's pretty much the glazed terracotta and then maybe like carved pumpkins and rails. I guess I spoke too soon because a solid colored block also has diagonal reflective symmetry. You can also make this pattern more complex by scaling up how big this fundamental triangle is. For instance, here, our fundamental triangle was just half of a block. But here, I'm using another triangle, again with the 2 short sides in line with the grid, but this one is both twice as wide and twice as tall. So the long diagonal side would run from that corner down to this corner, and then the bottom and the left edge would be the 2 short sides of the triangle. And sure enough, if you reflect it over and over, you get this floor pattern. Then we can double check 4 lines of reflective symmetry there, 4 lines of reflective symmetry there, and 2 lines of reflective symmetry right here. And then you don't have to use the same type of glazed terracotta. So if you use 2 to make a fundamental triangle, you just get this pattern. So it's still star 442, 4 lines of reflection, 4 lines of reflection, and 2 lines of reflection. And you can keep scaling up the triangles to be even bigger and bigger. So here, the fundamental triangle we're using, its long side is in line with the Minecraft grid. It's the bottom edge here. And then the 2 shorter sides run from bottom right corner to middle of the far side, and then again from middle of the far side to the bottom left corner. And then if we take that triangle and reflect ourselves 4 copies of it, we get this shape right here. And then if we just kind of keep reflecting this thing out over and over, we get this floor pattern here. I think this is my favorite star 442 pattern. Here, I did the same kind of fundamental triangle as I did for this red pattern, but I used the yellow glazed terracotta block. This is the result we get doing that. And then you can also see that the larger you make your fundamental triangle, the further apart the points of symmetry are going to be in your final floor design. So there's a nearly endless amount of star 442 patterns you could make. The only thing really limiting you is your render distance. The Minecraft wiki also has a glazed terracotta floor design page, so I checked it, and 6 of the patterns there were star 442. And so out of those 6, 2 of them had their fundamental triangle have its long side in line with the Minecraft grid, and the other 4, their fundamental triangle has the short sides in line with the Minecraft grid. And then the last thing here, I just tried to make star 442 designs that didn't use glazed terracotta. For this first pattern here, the two short sides of our fundamental triangle are in line with the Minecraft grid, and the long side runs right down the middle of two curved rails. And sure enough, we have 4 lines of reflection, 4 lines of reflection, and 2 lines of reflection right there. Kind of not, because with rails on pumpkins, there's a little bit of shading to their texture, so it's not a perfect reflection, but it's close enough that your eye still recognizes the pattern, and that's really all that matters. I tried to do the same thing with pumpkins, where the triangle has the long side in line with the Minecraft grid, and I got this, and it's kind of hard. This is star 442, but it's kind of hard to see, and because of the shading of the pumpkin texture, the middle point right here looks like it has only rotational symmetry just because of these little white highlights in the pumpkin texture. And then I did the same thing here using just half of the pumpkin texture as our fundamental triangle and got this pattern. And this is still for just one of those 12 types of floor patterns. So my new guess is that this is going to be a 7-part series instead of 3. I'll keep updating my guess because I think it'll be funny to have the series be like 1 of 3, 2 of 7, 3 of 5. Oh yeah, and if you use just half of the curved rail as the fundamental triangle, you get this pattern. So, 4 lines of symmetry, 4 and 2. You can also use 2 curved rails to make the fundamental triangle. And here you get this pattern. And I think you could actually make this in survival. There's a pattern very similar to this that Inspector Talon has in one of their Cartstone guides. And then the last one I thought was interesting. I used 2 blocks that each have 4 lines of reflective symmetry through their middles. So that's the smoker and the spruce log. And then the spruce trapdoor has an up and down reflective symmetry and a left-right reflective symmetry. Well, kind of, because the little metal straps on the trapdoor here are lighter on one side and darker on the other, so it's not a perfect mirror symmetry here. But if you forgot your glasses, this would pretty much be star 442 symmetry. I think this is enough information on star 442. My name's Chris. Thanks for watching.